It's time for the WrestleCast on the Sportscast Media Network. Join us now for a discussion on wrestling at the high school and college levels. Here's Gage Gill, Shane Barron, and Danny Davis.
Hey, it's the WrestleCast. I'm your host, Danny Davis. With me is Shane Barron and Gage Gill. Before we go further, we ask that you please like our broadcast and subscribe to our channel. Now, we're recording this here on a Sunday, and the Iowa women's basketball team just lost a close game to Ohio State in overtime. Still stings. I'm not going to go into it too far, but I'm going to try to get through this day. How about you guys?
Well, I sat there and watched that basketball game, and it proved that Iowa has got to get more balanced in scoring. Caitlin Clark was Caitlin Clark.
I want to welcome everyone back after about a 3-week hiatus. We had some really bad weather here in Iowa. We have listeners that are not in Iowa that are listening from afar that may not know the weather we had here, but a lot of people were pretty much trapped in, and the roads were bad, so none of us could meet up here last week. But more importantly, before that, Gage and his wife welcomed home another one to the family. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Mac Michael. You know, my wife's 4'10", so he's probably not going to be too tall. So I've already been just kind of thrown out there, you know, he might as well wrestle. So my wife, I'm just working on that idea now. My daughter probably won't be tall, and she could technically wrestle too. So I was telling you guys, I have a T-shirt that's getting made that says, I'm the real Mac Daddy. And I'm just going to leave that up for people to kind of figure out. I have a son named Mac, and, you know, if they don't understand it, I'm fine with it.
How's his sister treating him? She all over him and loving on him?
They're figuring it out. She was struggling with kind of sharing the love, you know, but they're starting to figure it out, which is good.
All right.
I can see the Winfield gym 14 years from now. The Mac attack begins.
Hey, I like that.
Now you better hope his shorter is going to be called Big Mac, and then you have McDonald's bugging.
Oh, gee, dad joke. Where's that button we had a couple weeks ago? Boo! All right, well, coming up on the show, we have an interview with a parent of a wrestler, and
Paula Bliven. She's married to Dustin Bliven, a former 2-time state champ at Columbus, and I just asked her a few questions about what it's like now as a parent to get these kids ready for youth wrestling and some of the trials and tribulations that they go through. I think you'll enjoy that interview.
All right, we'll have that. And Shane's also going to update us on some area wrestlers who are at the college level right now. We've got some high school rankings and more. First, guys, it's time for Point Counterpoint. This is where one of you will take one side of the issue and the other another side. Each person has 30 seconds to state their case. Today's subject is, when it comes to winning, do you celebrate or you act like you've been there before? Guys, go.
You celebrate it. There's no doubt. I think there's the right and wrong way to celebrate. So I was at the duels in Columbus yesterday, and there was a win where the athlete shushed the crowd. He got a point taken from the team in a duel competition. So you celebrate in a way that's not going to take team points.
Shane?
Acknowledge the crowd, get your hand raised, and go out in the hall and celebrate. You got to, I know we're trying to promote the sport, but there's always going to be somebody that takes that a little too far. It's always in the back of my head about Darian Caldwell and Brett Metcalf several years ago, where he actually did backflips, and I haven't seen any high school kid do anything of that nature, but doing backflips, and Metcalf took exception to it, and that just takes the sport back a few notches. So I'm going to take the counterpoint of just acknowledge the crowd.
All right, there you go. Got to shut you off.
Shut me off.
30 seconds each. All right, thanks, guys.
God, we're getting paid for the hour here, Danny. Come on.
A lot of action going around since we've been off the air. We'll get to that in a minute. First, let's take a look at the girls and boys wrestling rankings from Iowa Wrestle. We'll start with Gage. What do you got at 106, Gage?
Well, just to start off real quick, Wilton's ranked second as a team, but they have the most ranked wrestlers, so figure that one out. Don Bosco has Hayden Schwab ranked number 1. Aiden Bergman, a sophomore at Jessup's, ranked second. Connor Morrow, who's a freshman, brother to Cale Morrow, who's a finalist last year, at 12th. So look for them to, kind of move up their rankings, those Morrow brothers.
All right. Who do you got at 113?
113, Gavin Landers from Denver is a freshman, ranked first. Mason Shirk from Wilton, one of those Wilton guys who could very well be a finalist, is second. And there's a lot of Wilton guys, like I said, in these rankings.
Gage, tell me who you got at 120.
So 120, This weight class is absolutely loaded. Jaden Rankin from Nashua Plainfield's 1. Kale Morrow, finalist last year. You know, I'm a big fan of his. Senior for Akron Westfield 2. Rowdy Neighbor, our best name in high school wrestling, ranked 3rd. But there's Eli Becerra, who was a finalist, is 5th. Tayden Slaybaugh, who's been really good over his career's 4th. So that weight class is loaded.
All right. Who do you got at 126?
126. Jesse Lewis from West Sioux. They always have a dude. He's a senior. He's ranked 1st. Tayton Kufel from Alburnett. I like that name too. He's ranked 2nd. Alburnett's very good. You have Don Bosco in there. But Colton Munson from Ogden, who's just been a stud, he's ranked 3rd. So there's a lot of guys gunning for that title there at 126.
And who do you have at 132, Gage?
A freshman from Don Bosco, Dawson Youngblood, and then Tanner Ares from North Butler, Clarksville. And then you have Carson Thompson, a senior, brother to Alex Thompson, who's one of the greatest wrestlers in Iowa high school history, who went on to wrestle for Nebraska at that weight also.
All right, and 138?
138, Blake Allen from Underwood, Teague Smith from West Hancock. Then you have Preston Klosterman, who's a junior. Seems like he's been around forever for Alburnett, who's ranked down at 4th. So he's another guy that's, going to be have a shot at making the finals there.
And what about 144?
Corbin Rise. The Rise family has been around forever. His brother was a 4-time finalist, never won a title. So he's number 1 from Logan Magnolia. Bowden White from Denver, just a traditional powerhouse, number 2.
And 150?
150. Starmont they always have like one stud. And it seems like maybe not always the best team, but Keaton Moeller, who's just a phenom sophomore, and then Riley Radke from Missouri Valley. Danny Kinsella, who's just a phenomenal athlete from Trainers, ranked 3rd. He's a senior in that weight class.
All right, Starmont Stars getting on the board there. And who, finally, do you have at 157, Gage?
157, Kyler Kanak. I have no idea how he weighs 157. He's 157 pounds of muscle. He's going to UNI to wrestle next year. He's their quarterback. He's got to be the heavy-handed favorite. Kellen Smith from West Hancock's ranked 2nd there.
Shane, who do you got at 165?
Maddox Nelson of Underwood, a senior, is ranked 1 with John McGill of Colfax Mingo, also a senior. He's going to be number 2. At 175, Jace Nelson of Emmitsburg. He's a senior. He's ranked 1. And then you mentioned Mr. Knack there earlier, Caden Knack of Don Bosco. He's a senior at 175. And I forgot to put in Michael Raines, number 12th ranked at 165 from New London, a senior.
And you're at 190 now?
190, McCade Blocker from North Butler of Clarksville, senior. Nathan Bites of Maquoketa Valley, he's number 2, he's a junior. And our first local guy at 190 is Loudon Huizinga of Waco Wayland, junior. Very good football player, I remember covering him there.
At 215, Shane.
David Smith of West Hancock. Brady Davis of Maquoketa Valley. So this is a very senior laden as we get up to the upper weights. No other local athletes in that category.
And your last one?
We have Mason Nip of Columbus Catholic, senior, 285, number 1 ranked, and Cody Fox of East Buchanan. Football players and football fans will recognize that name. He's one of Iowa's top recruits as a lineman. And he's ranked number 2 currently at 285. Stretching our Mediapolis ties to locality here, we got Isaac Cox, number 8 from Cardinal of Eldon, also a senior. So there's your wrap up for Class 1A and the rankings.
Gage, you had mentioned something earlier in the week about the Ed Winger tournament. First off, tell me a little bit about the tournament and then give us some results.
Okay, so Ed Winger, first off, was a military guy, is kind of what he's known for, but he is a softball coach really at heart. He then got into some broadcasting and whatnot, and he kind of, I don't know if you want to say coined the term, but got credit for what's always said before the state wrestling any session starts, which is the wrestlers clear the mats. He's that guy. He started that, and he hasn't been doing that for a while. He passed away a few years ago. And so they named that tournament after him. So he's from Urbandale. So this is Urbandale's home tournament. So in this tournament, there was 187 ranked wrestlers, most of them from Iowa, but you had Nebraska, Minnesota, Missouri, Illinois, all represented there as well, different schools from those states. at 120 pounds. The top 4 guys in Class 3A were all there. And the finals was a number 1 versus number 2. And so just looking at some of the ranked matchups that we saw this week at that tournament, number 1 ranked Jake Knight versus number 2 Drew Ayala at 120. That was that 4-person, top 4 ranked weight class there. At 126, though, you had number 2 TJ Coaster versus number 4 Reichengraft. Another 1 versus 2. We talked about Coy Davison a couple weeks ago. He took on Carter Freeman, so that was a 1 versus 2. You had a 1 versus 2 at 150. Baz Diaz and Lucas Brohl. You had a 1 versus 3 at 165. Jacob Hegelson and Lincoln Jip. Just looking, there was another number 1 match at 215. Drayshawn Ross. But I mean, just up and down the weight classes, there's tons of ranked guys. So I tried to figure this out just going through track wrestling, but I saw at least 17 ranked guys who did not make the semifinals, just to show you kind of the depth of a tournament like that. You have a lot of guys that are really good, not really winning, coming away with a victory or anything like that. And so I think the cool thing about tournaments like this, we'll see a lot of these rematches coming up here very quickly at the state tournament, probably at districts. And I think we've talked about it throughout, our cast that we've had so far. These 3A teams are getting together and they're putting good on good, iron sharpening iron. And by the end of the year, when we listen to the finals or watch it or whatever, we're going to say, this is the 4th time these guys have met, and they're 2-1, or whatever. So I think that kind of makes it fun when you have the best guys wrestling the best guys. It's just going to draw more attention to the sport. But I was trying to figure out, I went back and watched a lot of them on like some of those, platforms that live stream. I honestly thought the 106 was one of the funner matches that I watched. And it was probably the worst ranked guys, number 11 Braxton Winky and number 4 Jack Walcate. But yeah, I don't know. There's some really good matches. Pretty prestigious tournament, I'd say.
All right, and we have the results from the Zagreb tournament.
I just stumbled upon this. I'm trying to be more knowledgeable about the Olympic wrestling scene and how United States is rolling there. And there was an event called the Zagreb Open. Just to make a long story short, the United States has got some heavy. I mean, we know from the college scene who's really good, and we follow that a little bit. But when you start going into Iran and Bulgaria and some others, I mean, that's their soccer, I guess, for lack of a better term. And the United States, I can't just say Spencer Lee's going to walk on the mat healthy and get an Olympic gold. They're just too good. I hope he does, and I hope some United States wrestlers do well. But I was kind of shocked to see just where we ranked amongst the international wrestlers. These I don't have the true information on this, but I'm under the understanding that the United States doesn't even have 2 weight classes for the upcoming Olympics qualified. I'll have to do more homework on that, but we want we want wrestling to be sort of like USA women's and men's basketball. We want to be the king on the block. We got some work to do.
Shane, you mentioned Spencer Lee, and I just thought I'd throw this out there real quick. So I was listening to an interview he gave with the Vandenbergs. He went on their show, and he was explaining the different ways you qualify. Mm-hmm. And he didn't even realize that he went to a tournament, even though he'd already qualified, and he took a spot from somebody else. He's like, I found it out later. And I don't know, just listening to that, when the wrestlers don't, are kind of unsure, mm-hmm.
how
all the ways you can qualify and all that, it's not maybe promoted enough.
From what I saw in this cast, we have to get from 57 kilograms. Our number 1 guy has not qualified the United States, and he might not qualify. That's why I keep saying Spencer Lee's got to kind of take over, maybe, or Thomas Gilman. And they keep saying all these wrestlers from Cuba, they have to do something in an upcoming Pan Am tournament. And you really got to dive in head first to understand all this stuff, and I'm trying to, but we're in some trouble there. I mean, these other nations, they take their wrestling as serious as we take other sports, perhaps, and wrestling's been pushed to the back burner a couple times here, and we're trying to bring it back. But don't start penciling gold medals for the United States in 2024. Maybe in the women's division, who knows? I don't know, but it's going to be an interesting few months coming up. Real quick, I agree with you that iron sharpens iron, and we want to see these good wrestlers. Do a lot of coaches, you think, in the future might say, well, I don't want to show my hand at these big tournaments, since if I have the number 2 or 3 guy and I keep wrestling one guy over and over and over, my chances of an upset when it really is the real deal up at Des Moines is lessened. Just your thoughts on that, Gage?
I think there's probably 2 ways to go about it. I think one is, if you have that top guy and he keeps beating this challenger, we'll say, eventually that kind of gets in your head. I beat you 2-3 times now. I own you. You're mine. Come back for a 4th helping. The other way is if they are pretty close. I think that's maybe what matters most. How close are they? If it's close, then maybe, I've lost you 3 times, but I've learned I'm not ever going to go down because you just are going to ride the crap out of me. I'm going to go, neutral when I get my choice or whatever. I think it just kind of depends, on the situation. But I do think some of these coaches use these even late tournaments to kind of move up and down a weight even. I mean, you see some guys this time of year still moving, which is crazy to me because you'd think it'd be kind of solidified. But I think once you get that pound allowance, once you get past, Christmas break, the weight classes are only 6 pounds apart. You go lose to a guy for the 3rd time.
Sure. Hey,
let's cut. I can get 5 pounds out of you. Let's cut. So I think that might be part of it too. Just kind of final lineup settling going on right now too. In these next 2 weeks, because we're now less than 3 weeks from districts, I think we're going to see less of these, big time matchups. You would think is, like you said, maybe don't show your hand, do your final preparations.
It gives the coach maybe to analyze some film. We got all kinds of internet and YouTube videos out there, and we got just the ability to see wrestlers from all over the state now. We got good coaches, so I personally think I'm just going to keep this close to my vest for a month or so, but there's still a month to have before the playoff or the districts and stuff come up.
Is that a disservice to the actual wrestler? Or does the wrestler realize that they're taking one for the team?
Most conversations I've had is that the wrestler wants to wrestle. Maybe with a little persuasion, you kind of point out the big picture. And I'm sure there's some pouting and there's some hard feelings for that weekend, but I'm sure that that goes away when the hand is raised at the big show in Des Moines.
I think you bring up a good point, Danny. Like Shane and I were kind of talking as if like the coach is going to make the ultimate decision, which a lot of times they do. It comes down to the coach. This is what we need to do. This is best for you, best for the team. But I do think the athlete's mindset matters. Those coaches know this kid loses, he can bounce back, versus there's some kids where you throw them out there and they lose to the big guy and they know that's going to be tough to beat them the next time. So I think that matters, just knowing your kid. But I will say, like a lot of these big time, elite matchups, all those guys know they're really good and that, it's wrestling. Anybody can win on any day. But do you want to throw yourself out there to number 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10? But if you're going to a tournament like this, I'd imagine they just kind of have the conversation of there's 87 ranked guys here. You're going to run into some dudes today, just know we might drop one, we might gain a couple. I think it's good for the sport, when you see these big matchups.
Interesting. And Shane, you mentioned the psyche of a wrestler. You had mentioned that before, and that's something to maybe look at for upcoming episodes. I'd like to get into that. Shane, also, you had mentioned earlier the week that you had some information on area wrestlers and them wrestling at the college level, and let's have a listen.
Hello, this is Shane Barron for the WrestleCast, giving you some updates about some local wrestlers who have went on to the college level. First of all, we're going to talk about Marcel Lopez and Dominic Lopez. They've been competing for Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville.
Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville improved to 4-2 in the last couple of matches that they had. They improved to 4-2 in conference with a 24-9 victory over Buffalo. And this is where Marcel Lopez comes in. This is a quote. The lightweights started off getting bonus points in a couple of matches. That was from Jeremy Spates, the Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville coach. Marcel Lopez defeated Tommy Maddox of Buffalo 5-2. Dom Lopez lost his match to Marcus Petrillo 9-4. And at an earlier match last week, Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, SIU-E is what we're going to call it from now on. They improved to 3-2 over an all 2-1 in the MAC conference. And Spates also commented on the lightweights doing a good job there. Marcel Lopez, 7-2 victory at 133 over Edinburgh's Lane Akey. Lopez is a redshirt freshman. Dominic Lopez is a true freshman. And Dom dropped a 6-5 decision to Joey Arnold from Edinburgh. Overall, for their 2023-24 campaign, Marcel has improved to 11-8, and Dom is still a respectable 9-9 in his true freshman season for SIU. Another wrestler competing at the Division I level from Southeast Iowa is Blaine Frazier. He is at the University of Indiana this year, and as he was last year, he's a redshirt freshman as well. He is 10-8 this year. 10-8 as a redshirt freshman and 6-10 this year. Highlights for this season include a 6th place finish at the very, very competitive Southern Scuffle, and he was also a 2nd place finisher at the Sheridan tournament. But Blaine, state champion in Class 2A from Burlington, Notre Dame. He attended Mount Pleasant High School, and Blaine Frazier was destined to probably be in the starting lineup for the University of Indiana at 133 before his career is finished. So let's keep an eye out on Blaine.
And Gage, you would also talk to some.
Ty Scorpel's ranked 9th right now in 2A for CJWMU, and he's just on a tear. Looked really good yesterday at the Columbus Junction duels. And I just talked to him, and he right now is confident. He feels really good. And then the other one that I've been talking to a lot is Jacob Nelson. He had a huge win over his West Liberty opponent yesterday, which should solidify him the number 1 seed at district. So, you know, both those guys I just kind of talked to about they're feeling the best they've ever felt as wrestlers, a junior and a senior, and looking to qualify here in less than 3 weeks now.
And I just wanted to update my research here. Marcel Lopez, Dominic Lopez, both won over in their duel against Lindenwood. What's striking to me is Southern Illinois University is now 5-2, and one of the teams they lost to was Illinois, the University of Illinois. So they're kind of on the cusp of maybe qualifying for the NCAA tournament. We'll see how they do in the MAC. But Marcel and Dominic representing Southeast Iowa very well. William Penn, in their senior night, they lost for the women 33-12. We've been talking to Jake Cadle here once in a while for the WrestleCast. They lost to Grandview 33-12, and Mia Palumbo didn't wrestle that night. So I'll have to get with Jake and find out what's going on there. But Iowa State is off till the 26th when they face Oklahoma. UNI had to cancel their last tournament because of weather that we acknowledged before. They'll be in Stillwater on the same night for Oklahoma State. So that's kind of your local college wrap-up.
Guys, we're going to take a break. Coming up in the next segment, we have a discussion on favorite wrestling movies, some college wrestling results, and Shane has an interview with a mom who is a wrestling parent right after this. Helmerson Chiropractic in New London offers services customized to treat your needs. Whether you need relief from chronic pain, sports injuries, headaches, carpal tunnel syndrome, fibromyalgia, vertigo, or just overall aches and pains, Dr. Kyle Helmerson can customize a treatment plan for you. It's time you enjoyed a pain-free life. Contact Helmerson Chiropractic in New London at 319-217-9425.
And now, back to some more Matt Chat with Gage, Shane, and Danny on the WrestleCast.
Welcome back to the WrestleCast. I'm Danny Davis, and with me is Shane Barron and Gage Gill. We'd like to remind you to like our content, and please subscribe to our channel, and while you're on our channel, check out some other stuff. We've got some college updates and results coming up, and an interview with Paula Bliven, who is a mother of a wrestler and has some interesting input on what a parent goes through. But right now, it's point and counterpoint, and guys, tell me what we're doing here on this one.
All right, so if you take the 3 D1 wrestling schools in the state of Iowa, Iowa State, Northern Iowa, We're going to throw out there who each one of us, Shane and I, feels has the best shot to win a title. I think I know who you're going to say.
You don't know me that well.
Okay, I'll let Shane go first.
We're going to let Shane go first. And Shane, you've got 30 seconds, and I'll throw it to Gage, and you've got 30 seconds. Shane, go.
Okay, I'm going to go with Real Woods at 141. And I know that's not really a big surprise. I'm trying to fake my way through it. But anyway, Real Woods is one of those wrestlers that just has an uncanny knack of knowing exactly what time it is on the clock. I'm sure he'll frustrate most Iowa fans with 4-1 victories and getting that takedown with 15 seconds to go and things like that. But he's been doing it for so long. I just don't think anybody has the skill to take Real Woods.
Gage.
I actually thought that you were not going to say him, so I'm going to go with the other option, which is 184 pounder from UNI, Parker Kekison. I just feel like he's kind of proven himself at that weight, and there's not really a challenger who's shown that he's dominant. I mean, it's a pretty open weight class, so I'm going to go with the Panther.
We were talking earlier about favorite wrestling movies. I'm going to step aside on this because the only real wrestling movie I've seen, well, it's not a real wrestling movie. The only wrestling movie I've seen was the one with Mickey O'Rourke. Was it just called The Wrestler, I think?
Was that all we can use?
That's all I know.
We can only use wrestling that's actually wrestling? Uh-oh.
No, you guys got to come up with the real stuff. That's the only wrestling movie I know.
Well, I'm going to get it started because I got such an obscure movie that probably no one's ever heard of. But the only movie that probably all three of us have seen is Vision Quest. And if that's one of your two favorites, you can talk about it because I like that movie. But I'm going to dust off some old VCR tapes and go with Peter Falk in a movie called All the Marbles. And it's just a good movie with wrestling as its backdrop. It was about female professional wrestling, and they made it look like it was real. And when you're 12 years old, it looked real. But it was more about the human experience. It was just these three guys living from paycheck to paycheck, going from venue to venue, and sometimes they'd go to a carnival and have to wrestle in that, and it was a humiliating experience, but they needed the $100 or whatever they were going to get paid that night, and they stayed in cheap motels, and it was just good to see how the human dynamic worked.
So I'm going to throw a curveball. I'm going to throw out these documentaries on BTN. Was it last year? The Brands Brothers, which was phenomenal. You know, there was the Eli one about Marinelli's future brother-in-law who'd passed away, and just how, you know, wrestling was this supportive community when he got in that accident and died. And then The Duel, that's about Gable. I don't know if it's out. I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen like some previews of clips. I don't even know if it's released yet.
I think it's on YouTube.
Okay, I can't wait to watch that. There's something about like those documentaries when you get like the kind of what we're doing here, trying to do, like getting like the inside, and then you have other people talking about it from the outside, and just kind of going like behind the scenes. You know, just talking about some of these amazing wrestling stories. I love those. They just did one on Peyton Robb, I think, the other day. BTN did. He almost died after NCAAs last year. I just really have enjoyed, you know, kind of watching some of those. So not even a movie, but just, I don't know. I think it's great for the sport, and it kind of helps you to cheer for those individuals after you watch their documentary. Like, oh, I know them a little better, you know?
When you watch ESPN 30 for 30 shows, what you're referring to is sort of along those lines. When you're sitting in row 40 of Carver, little chess pieces running around a basketball court, or two chess pieces on a wrestling mat, I love those kind of films because these are real people with real problems and real issues, and you have perhaps similar problems and issues, but how did they get through it? How did you get through it? And you just kind of picture yourself in there. You might not have their athleticism, but you have their problems, and I like those movies as well.
I feel like just throwing two that need to be made. Okay, Spencer Lee's mom needs one. You know, because she was like an Olympic, not jiu-jitsu, but something like that, Krav Maga or whatever that sport is, because they could have her breaking her glasses is like the opening scene. I know we keep talking about him all the time, but AJ Ferrari, his story isn't over. There was a line up from the bottom of Carver to the top signing autographs for little kids. He's going to go from Mr. Fast Twitch to Mr. Misunderstood pretty soon. But those are the stories, though, where you only see surface level social media stuff that's why I picked this rather than going to an actual movie is, you know, it's fun to know a little bit more into their background and whatnot. So that's my kind of curveball to the question.
And you said Vision Quest. Was that right, Shane? That was your...
Well, I thought that's the one you were going to take, so go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm not going to take it. Is Matthew Bodine was in that?
Yeah, and Linda Fiorentino was his love interest, and not a bad love interest, I might add.
You spoke, Shane, with a mother of a wrestler, Paula Bliven of New London. She gave you a take, kind of what mothers go through, and just some different input on everything that they have to. Well, they kind of have to be a counselor, I had noticed in part of your interview.
It's not just, hey, Johnny, let's wake up and get in the car and go. I mean, the New London contingent went to Omaha, and I've talked to Paula lately, and according to her, they learned a lot, and that's kind of what it's all about. They probably didn't maybe on the scoreboard do as well as they'd hoped, but they got to see competition from outside of the southeast Iowa area and Iowa for that matter, and they got to see everything, and that's a great experience for these kids. But yeah, it's true that most of these kids don't just get in the car and say, well, I lost twice, let's go home. No, they're upset about it, and they've worked hard. And the parent of a wrestling student is maybe as difficult as being the coach itself, and she brought that out very well. I think you'll like this.
This is Shane Barron for the WrestleCast, kind of looking at what it takes to be a successful youth wrestler. I was fortunate enough to get Paula Bliven to sit down with us and tell us a little bit about what it's like. So welcome to the show, Paula.
Thank you, Shane.
And I didn't even know this until minutes ago, and it turns out you're the right person to talk to because you're going. Can you describe a little bit about this ginormous Omaha tournament that the kids are going to?
I mean, I'll do my best. I honestly don't know a lot about it either. It's called Winter Nationals. It's out in Omaha Saturday and Sunday of this weekend. Both boys and girls, different brackets, will be wrestling in it, and it's little kids, like maybe pre-K up to middle school. Maybe not pre-K, kindergarten for sure, I would say.
And is this one of the bigger tournaments of the Midwest?
Yes, definitely. I mean, so there's this one, and then they will have a district wrestling tournament at the beginning of February, and then if they qualify, then they'll be on to their state tournament. There are other bigger tournaments also, but our reasoning for going to this one was maybe to get a little bit of that big tournament exposure feeling before you go into a district tournament, or, you know, if you are blessed enough to make it to the state tournament, just to get some big time tournament experience under your belt, and so you're not so deer in the headlights under the big lights.
So how many tournaments does your family go to? And I'm sure you go to more than some parents and less than other parents.
Yes, I would say, yeah, we are probably on the heavy side, but there's still people going to, you know, multiples in a weekend. About since Thanksgiving weekend, we've been almost one a weekend. Maybe we missed a weekend there around Christmas. So what's that put us at? 5 or 6 maybe?
5 or 6 so far?
Yeah, I would say that, yeah.
If you're a parent and you're looking to have your child be state tournament caliber or something, how many do you need to go? I mean, you probably see a lot of good competition already.
Well, you do, but then, you know, we have friends who are like at the next level, and they don't go to a lot of these smaller tournaments. And I mean, they're going to Tulsa a few times a winter. They're going out to Virginia, you know. So they're just doing the really, really big tournaments, and we're not there. We're not ready for that, and I don't need to be ready for that anytime soon. But I mean, and that's the thing with youth wrestling, the great thing, and maybe it's a double-edged sword, because, you know, there is really, really elite, and then there's somewhere in the middle, and then there's a lot of beginner tournaments too. Like in a few weeks, Morning Sun is having just a beginners tournament for just the kids that are the first or second year wrestlers, so they can get their feet wet and not have to feel so intimidated by possibly getting paired up with a expert wrestler.
Would you say, and for those of you who are listening and aren't aware, Miss Paula Bliven is a former varsity softball coach for New London, so she would have some expertise in both fields of softball and wrestling. Do you see these youth tournaments as sort of a similar thing as the softball scene, where you better play some club softball if you want to compete even in your high school teams?
Well, and I mean, And good and as bad as it is, I talk out of both sides of my mouth when I talk about youth sports. I mean, I do think that with these club teams, we've eliminated kids, and that's exactly what I don't want to happen. I want all kids to be able to participate. You know, if you look at numbers, especially across small Southeast Iowa schools, the numbers are down because I think kids have been eliminated at a younger age because they didn't have the interest to play club. Their families didn't want to give up the time and commitment, which I totally understand. And so they weren't playing at a younger age. And then by the time they are at a middle school or high school level, they don't feel like they belong on the team anymore, which is what I want to not have happen anymore. I would like to open it up for all participators because we need the numbers. I mean, if you look at our high school wrestling team, you know, we've got 6 or 7 guys out, where if we had 13, we would have at least be able to have kids taking forfeits.
Okay. From your perspective, what do you as a parent have to do to get ready for these tournaments? It's not just get in the car and go. Yeah, I'm sure you don't wake up on a Saturday and go, let's cruise to Omaha. So take us through kind of what goes on there.
Yeah, I mean, well, now a lot of them obviously are pre-registration. You know, these youth tournaments, they've turned into big, huge monsters, and they fill up. They close registration. So now a lot of times you have to pre-register through track wrestling. And there are still some that you have to mail in. You know, these tournaments aren't quote unquote on track, meaning it's not all done online, and they still do the old school paper mail-in registration forms. But even those types of tournaments can fill up, so you've got to get registered ahead of time. A lot of times you can still walk into some tournaments too, but so that's first and foremost. You got to be prepared enough to know where to sign up for the tournaments, and that's an intimidating factor for some of these new families. They just feel like it's also overwhelming, and I understand, because it's, you know, these people all know what they're doing over here, and you're trying to get into the knowledge, and it just seems overwhelming. So I do appreciate these questions, and because it's a learning curve, and you can't be as scared to ask the questions on how do I get registered and how do I even get involved in this big, huge thing. But yeah, getting self-registered, you know, you got to make sure everything's clean. All the lucky socks are washed, the singlet's ready to go, everything's packed in the bag.
Lucky socks have to be washed.
Right? Yeah.
You send a kid in there with damp or mildewy socks that have luck on them. You've got a parent issue that's way beyond whether a kid raises his hand for victory or not.
That's right.
But interesting that you brought that up. I'm not trying to make light of it. Just what kind of rituals do you see some of these kids going through when you go to these?
It's funny. I mean, we were at a tournament just the other weekend, and I mean, these little boys, my son is a 4th grader, and these boys were, you know, that age. And they are walking around like you would see Spencer Lee. I mean, they are focused, and they've got their big headphones on, and they're warming themselves up and shaking their arms out and, you know, patting down their muscles. And I mean, they've watched these older, really good wrestlers do this, you know, and now it's just wild. Of course, they're taking it in through observation, but then they feel like that's getting them prepared. As far as rituals, you know, my son doesn't necessarily have any rituals yet, but just to see these little boys doing the stuff that the older kids do, it's funny how much they take in that we don't even realize. And you know, that's the stuff they do to get themselves prepared.
It's interesting that you see Little League Baseball on ESPN, and the kids are cocking their elbow and adjusting their brim of their hat just like the big leaguers would. So that's interesting that you said that. I can almost envision a whole generation of young girls after they make a 3 giving the shoulder shrug. You know,
because why not? Why wouldn't you?
Heck, I would. It is what you see, and you're not going to see that stuff unless you are out there a bunch of times. So what is your biggest challenge as a parent? I mean, unless you win them all, there's going to be that moment where you have to be a counselor. So is that a challenge for you? Is sometimes even when they win, they're mad about it. So as a parent, you probably are studying a little ed psych.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely have the benefit of being a coach, right? So that's helpful. My husband was a wrestler, so that's also helpful. But me as a parent, like, I don't want my kid to only be successful. I want them to have the hardships and that be able to teach them that that's how you learn. That's how we're going to make improvements, and you learn from all of the downfalls. But it's still hard. Like, I learned after being a competitor, and then I started coaching, and it's so much harder coaching than I ever thought. And then I became a parent, and that takes the cake. It's got to. I don't know what's after that, but I mean, and we're still at low level here. So, and I think about that all the time. The very few close matches my son has been in, it's been like heart pounding, feelings I haven't felt really ever in a sports world. It's hard to explain, but being able to coach them through that and not having the devastation of defeat. And I tell my husband all the time, I don't need a world beater that's 10 years old. I want my son to grow up to be a respectable man and know how to win and know how to lose. And if we take our lumps here and we can grow up and be a successful human, that's what we want out of it.
Well, as a former volleyball club scene parent, those stressed me out much more than they stressed my child out. And when they get up there and the match is on the line and they're serving, it's more painful for me to watch. My parent could never watch me play at all. So
right, because we're out of control. That's what I learned as a coach.
We have no control.
You're out of control, and that's what I didn't know where these feelings were coming from. I'm like, it's because I don't have control.
One thing that's always interested me about wrestling is, and you as a parent and a PE teacher and a coach, you have a solid foundation of background in dealing with this, but the nutrition aspect of wrestling, especially in youth sports, they're always watching their weight. I know there's limits or there's new rules that, they don't want kids cutting weight like what they did in maybe the 80s or something.
Right.
But is that a challenge for you?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I've grown up around wrestling my whole life. So I knew what it was like in the late 90s and watched my classmates come to school sucked up. And I don't see that now. Thank heavens they've made changes and different things. And at the youth level, I don't see it in our household. But you are conscious of it. I mean, they do have to weigh in every week. So it's not like you can be loading up on everything all week long. I mean, I'm fortunate. My son kind of eats like a bird anyway. So, but he's a sugar addict. So it's something that we've been able to talk and teach about. And it is a slippery slope. Like, you don't want to be hammering it all the time, but you do want to teach your kids how to eat healthy, but not so much so that they're concerned about it strictly for wrestling or whatever else.
Yeah, kids are one of two ways. You may say, let's have a healthy meal, and they don't eat. Or they say, kids are kids, so let's have some lean protein, and they go and eat 7 cheeseburgers from McDonald's. Who knows?
Correct.
So, yeah, you have to be an educator there. You have to be an educator. Just any last comments about the youth wrestling scene that we can gravitate towards?
Not necessarily. I mean, I know across the board, youth sports parenting has not gotten a great rap in years recent. I mean, and I think it's all valid points. But I do think we also have to remember that everybody's probably trying to do their best in getting their kids involved. Like, we all need to be able to encourage our youth to get involved in some sort of sport or a way to move their body. So when we see the crazy come out in these parents, it's so easy to judge and so easy to stand back, but we also have to think, they're just trying to do their best and maybe find some way to educate those people, I guess, more than anything. I mean, parenting's hard, whether we're in youth sports or we're just becoming a new parent. Parenting is the hardest hood you're ever going to live through. So
I think we both need to go to Ray Gun right now and get a T-shirt that just says "Parenting is hard." That would sell thousands and thousands of T-shirts. But interesting perspective. And Miss Bliven, I can't even help it. I called you Mrs. Bliven. We teach together here at New London. But Paula Bliven, appreciate your time and thank you for joining the WrestleCast.
Thank you, Shane.
All right, thank you, Shane. Great interview there. Gage, you had something to say about that.
Sorry, yeah. I was just going to go back to the celebrations we talked earlier, and I brought them up every episode. Might as well keep it going. I remember when my cousin Sam made the finals, And, you know, you see those celebrations where the guys run off and they jump and grab their coaches. He ran right past my Uncle Damon, who was in his corner, and Coach Cheery. And his mom, Jen Lloyd, was in the first row of the stands and went and hugged her. And somebody did a good article on it, and it was just kind of talking about, you know, as like a wrestling mom, you know, making the meals, and they have a scale and all that stuff, but also like just helping them to overcome the mental stuff. I remember the next year, you know, there's people just blasting Sam on like Twitter and stuff because he got tech-falled by Happel, who's for you and I ranked 6th in the nation right now, you know, and is he the number 1 kid? So those wrestling parents are like the mental coaches after the coach is done with them. And you gotta keep your kid, you know, afloat. When you lose, it's on you. There's nobody else. You were out there in the circle, and you got to help them to come back. So
and just to dovetail off that, just think how difficult it is to not get exposed somehow to all the garbage that goes on with the social media. I mean, yeah, you pretty much have got to take on all roles as a parent. So I appreciate Paula giving up some of her time for that interview.
Gage, you did wrestle. I want to ask you about the ride home with your parents in the car after a loss. What was that like?
I was never that great, so I lost, you know, a decent amount. But I remember, so I started wrestling in 4th grade, and I didn't win a match for a really long time. I was pretty timid and, you know, very unsure. You know, got into junior high and won some, and then my 8th grade year, I won a lot more than I had previously, but still, it's not like I was amazing. But, you know, I just think that it's one of those things where you went out and you gave it your all, and it's 1v1, and there's times where you just get manhandled by someone who's probably good. Everybody sees it, you know, all your friends, parents.
Good point.
You know, there's no hiding from it. Like I remember, you know, my Uncle Damon asked me a couple times, "You still having fun?" You know, and like I remember Jake Lerdahl making a comment. I don't even think he made it to me, but just saying, "Hey, I think you're probably the most improved person, you know, that we have," and like that stuff means a lot because, you know, there's no hiding from it. And so, you know, those parents go through a lot too. And I think that's why you see like the crazy wrestling mom. That's a term out there. That's why, because they are a part of it. It's not that they're just this crazy person. They're living and breathing, and they're the assistant coach, and, you know, they're an extension of that kid, and the whole family's a part of it. So I think, you know, sometimes those people maybe get a bad rep, but they're important.
Both you guys have been around wrestling enough. At wrestling meets, who gets more into it, mom or dad?
I think the moms get seen better than the dads because you see these people who you don't see in that light all the time. I don't know if they get more crazy than the dad, but I think they're maybe more noticeable. I don't know if that's fair or not, but you see some people who may be somewhat even keel most of the time, and they're jumping up and down and pulling their hair out and slapping the mat.
Mama Grizzly stuff. Shane?
I'll say that from what I've seen, the moms might get more into it, but they're not as verbal and vocal.
Really?
The dads are yelling out wrestling moves, and the moms are more of a hands to their chest and hopeful and wishing and almost look like they're praying, but you know they're into it. But that's a good question. I would have to. I'll just go with dads if I'm in a court of law. I'll go dad.
Would it be easy to say that maybe we all live vicariously through our children?
I've had kids come up through the ranks in the youth sports and they don't like it, but you're yelling out plays, and I've coached both my kids at some point. And it's awkward for them, and then you kind of take a step back and go, you know, you're trying to be helpful, but
Right.
you got to be cognizant of what your kid's going through too.
The one that I love, because I saw this a little yesterday. So I was standing on the wall, right center mat of Columbus Junction, West Liberty, and when there's an almost pin, when you just have parents and kids just slapping whatever they can slap to kind of signal like, hey, ref, he's pinned. You know, there's people slapping the wall. I might even done it because I got really into it there during Jackson Jones's match. But, you know, parents slapping the bleachers like, hey, he's pinned, you know, and you just see some of that behavior that, I don't know, it just adds to the environment, I think.
My wrestling photographer goes out and he brings back all these photographs of what he's taken at the meets, and some of the best shots are the heavyweights, and you can tell that the crowd, or the team anyway, are really rooting for the heavyweight. And I don't know if he's the underdog or what, but they just really get into it when it comes to heavyweights. Is there something to that?
It kind of depends on your team a little. So like for CJWMU, for instance, Russ Coyle's the heavyweight. He's undefeated right now, ranked third. He's kind of the hammer. There's a bunch of really good wrestlers. He's kind of the hammer. And so I think like that's kind of like the anchor. Like he brings the lineup around, you know. And so I think that's kind of part of it. There's a guy, whoever first sets the tone, but that heavyweight a lot of the times is he's the one that seals the deal. So that might be why.
I'll just say that from a local school standpoint, there's always some kid that probably is trying wrestling for the first time or second, you know, maybe it's a second year, and their job is to not get pinned.
Yeah.
You know, they're working hard and they're putting in the effort, and they might be outmatched, but they're just giving it everything they got, and that could go for any weight. But it just seems like you got a big kid in the hallway, hey, you want to try wrestling? So he's out there in his singlet and he's working hard, and I think that's why fans kind of gravitate towards the heavyweights, perhaps.
Interesting take. Guys, before we get out here, let's take a look at college rankings and college news. What all you got?
There's 2 weight classes I really want to highlight. So I'll start with 125. The most recent kind of upset is Drake Ayala lost to Tony Ramos over the weekend, or Anthony Ramos of Purdue over the weekend in a 4-1 match at Carver, where Ayala had a leg late, looked like he was going to get a takedown to tie it, ended up, wasn't able to get the takedown. So Ayala now becomes the 8th number 1 ranked wrestler at 125 that's lost this year. So just the parity of that weight class, it's almost like the Sports Illustrated cover. Once you get that number 1 ranking, you're probably going to lose. But
that is it is.
I just think it shows how wide open that weight class is. And there's been other upsets in there too that aren't even the number 1 guy. Like over the weekend, Davis of Penn State, one of their weaker weights, he's ranked 14th, beat D'Agostino of Michigan, who's a podium chaser this year. So that 125, I just find that interesting. And then the other one is 157. So here's some of the upsets just in the last couple weeks. Michael Blockus has beaten Franek of Iowa and Peyton Robb of Nebraska. Franek ranked 2nd, Robb ranked 3rd. Okay, Blockus was ranked in the double digits. UNI's Downey also beat Robb. Downey wasn't even ranked. You had number 23 Travis of Okie State beat Scott, who's the 4th ranked wrestler from NC State. Then you have Chittum of Iowa State, who we've talked about a little bit. He beat number 4 at the time, Teamer of Arizona State. And so you're talking about a lot of losses to the top 5 guys. And it just seems like that weight class it's wide open. You have some guys like David Carr. He's been ranked 6th to 8th. He was a national champ, and so I think it just shows you how deep it is, that anybody can beat anybody. But it kind of makes it fun when it's not like, I love the Gable Stevensons of the world when they're the top dog and everybody's chasing them. But it's kind of fun when it's like, who knows what the heck's going to happen. I guess one of my only problems with the rankings there, when we get to seeding, the seedings are going to be way different than the rankings just because that head-to-head's going to come into play. I'd love it if the NCAA would just rank them how they'd be seeded if the tournament was today, but those head-to-head matchups will be huge. So that's, I guess, how I just wanted to start. Those 125 and 157 are just wide open for anybody.
Well, I was watching the Iowa versus Purdue, and of course I wanted to see that match, and they've stressed in either Iowa's matches or anyone else's matches that, like you said, 125 is a complete free-for-all. Anybody in the top 10, maybe even top 15, could make a serious run for a title, or at least being in the top, in the final championship match. And I was kind of giggling there while you were speaking about Jacob Camacho was ranked number 1, and I did a little research on Jacob Camacho of NC State. And as soon as I spoke about it on WrestleCast, he got beat. From watching that Ayala Ramos match, it's like Spencer Lee and Ramos. I'm sure if Spencer Lee and Ramos were to go at it 10 times, Spencer Lee would win 8 or 9. Ayala and Ramos are probably 5 and 5. And just who's going to get that takedown? I will say the Ramos takedown of Ayala was legit. I mean, He just steamrolled him and took him to his back. And I think Ayala, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he in the waning seconds kind of have him tilted almost like it was really close?
It was close.
Yeah.
And I think part of it, especially, because we've talked a lot of Iowa, is just the styles. There's different styles of wrestling, especially in college. And like Iowa's style is kind of grind you out, wear you out, and win close matches. And when you do that, it just takes one shot, especially in the 3-point takedown era now, for an upset to happen. But Ramos kind of reminds me of he's like a home run hitter who hits a lot of doubles and singles too. I mean, he's always just looking for, as a 25-pounder, looking for a throw or looking for some kind of roll through, and so he loses matches. He could pin anybody, he could beat anybody too. Yeah. And that's what makes it kind of fun.
Interesting tidbit here. I had seen while I was watching the Iowa-Purdue match, Purdue had not beat Iowa since 1961. The last time Purdue beat Iowa, John F. Kennedy was president. Since then, we've had JFK, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Bill Clinton, George Bush Jr. We've had Obama, and we've had Donald Trump, and here we are with Joe Biden. All those administrations, and Purdue has still not beat Iowa. Explain that.
For all the listeners out there, Danny wasn't looking at anything. That was all off the top of his head. I think that's very impressive.
That's some social studies teacher gets a little pat on the back for that one, Danny. You can probably keep adding those names up for Purdue not beating Iowa in wrestling.
Oh, can you? Okay.
It's a basketball state. I've been there on an away trip to watch football every year. And, one thing me and my buddies always do is we go out to the local, establishments when we go on our away trips. And all those bars are filled with basketball stuff.
Yeah.
Where if you went downtown Iowa City, you'd see a variety of Hawkeye stuff. Those are basketball schools, Indiana and Purdue. It's an astronaut, Let's go to Mars and let's be really good at basketball are the two focuses there. So, that might be part of it. Just wrestling's not as big in their state.
Yeah.
It's more basketball. So they have to recruit guys from elsewhere. And I don't know how appealing West Lafayette and Bloomington are in the winter months.
In all my football travels, West Lafayette is the most messed up city in the Big Ten as far as driving around. It's a good thing I had a photographer driving because I'd probably still be driving around West Lafayette. And there wasn't a whole lot to see there anyway.
Beautiful campus in the fall.
Mackey Arena might be a nice place to watch a basketball game, but it would be cozy for a wrestling match. I will say that was a good atmosphere, but the press is far away. It's just not.
So this is how much of a nerd I am, Danny. So when you're talking about why hasn't Purdue beat Iowa, so I like going on and seeing where guys are from. And so when you look at like these D1 wrestling recruits, Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois, sometimes some Nebraska, some Oklahoma, a lot of guys scattered. Nevada and Utah a little bit. But then you're pretty much talking about Pennsylvania, Ohio, and like New Jersey area.
Yeah.
It's not like you're seeing a bunch of dudes from, Montana or, just go around the nation, Florida. I mean, it's kind of like a belt from like Utah to New Jersey.
Yeah.
And that's the line of where these guys are coming from. And then Indiana just happens to be this big basketball state in the middle, so that might be the answer.
Well, I think we've alienated our Council Bluffs listeners and our West Lafayette listeners.
For those of you in West Lafayette, I'm sorry, but I'm not really that sorry. It's just not a well laid out city.
All right. Any other college stuff coming up, guys, that you want to talk about before we get out of here?
No, I did just hunker down and watch the Penn State match and against Michigan. And I thought Michigan can give them a roll. And then I stumbled onto a website from State College, Pennsylvania. It was their local paper, and they predicted 31-3. And I'm like, okay, that's a little harsh. I know they're good, but Michigan should give them a pretty good, 27-9 or something. And one was a kind of a late fluke pin. Michigan was just dominated. They looked like they didn't want to be there on the same mat with them. Penn State is really going to roll. And we mentioned the Ferrari situation with us. I don't even know if we want Ferrari at 197 this year because Aaron Brooks is at 197. If he does come to Iowa, let's just save the year for him. I think it's probably too late really to get involved now, but they are just loaded. When you get to, and they have Shane Van Ness at 149, that's not even there. The only match they lost was 174 to Shane Griffiths. It was a transfer, and that guy was unranked, and he nearly pulled off the upset. The wrestling room at Penn State must be just incredible. Their second string could probably be ranked in the top 10. They're just really, really solid wrestling program.
I know we've talked to Iowa a lot. I think this is a weird year for them. So there's some weights that we still don't know who the guy is. I think it's obvious that we're not going to have Gabe Arnold.
Yeah.
He's in a red shirt, but he still gets 3 more matches. So I hope we see him Penn State, Oklahoma State, and then pick one of the others that shouldn't be close. Keeter, I think we kind of see he's not probably ready. Not that he's not good enough, but I think when you look at weights, he's around 225. He's given up 40 to 60 pounds to a lot of these heavyweights. So he definitely has the skill. It's just a matter of what's he going to do, what decisions. Hill has looked a lot better. He's beaten his guys. Glazier is undefeated. I think this is a good story for like in the transfer portal era. Glazier's been around for 5 years. Here's the model of wait your turn type of guy. But 84, Iowa doesn't really have a guy because you're redshirting Arnold. 33, Schriever, Teskey. That's kind of going back and forth. You look at 49. Is it going to be Rachi or Voinovich? That's going back and forth. Those guys in the gambling, that really hurt Iowa. Everything else is kind of figured out. It's weird that there's a couple weights that aren't decided this late in the year for Iowa. That's very unusual. Can your Franics and Real Woods, can they start getting some dang bonus points? Because they're stressful to watch sometimes. Real Woods got his offense going a little bit against Purdue, but those two could definitely be absolutely anybody. But right now it almost seems like they could lose to anybody too, just with their style.
It looks like Iowa has kind of taken, sort of just from a fan standpoint, just an approach of we're going to win our duels, but when you need bonus points in the Big Tens and the NCAAs, it just looks like a Penn State fait accompli. There's big language for you there.
Really? Penn State all the way, you say?
I don't want to say that, but I have to.
Caitlin Clark, in an interview this week, called Iowa fans savages. Other people that are not from Iowa or not Iowa fans kind of wondered, why did she say that? As a wrestling fan, football fan, basketball fan, do you guys agree?
How did she mean savages?
In a good way.
In a good way?
It was the game they had the other night, and it was -20 with the wind chill factor.
Oh,
And
okay.
still, Carver was full, and she said savages.
I will say this about the Iowa fan, and I've been a fan since I was old enough to turn the TV on. But Caden Proctor is a enormous offensive tackle prospect. I, like most people, couldn't wait to see Caden Proctor play for Iowa. He'd signed, or he's committed. It was all done, and then 3 days before, you as a fan feel like the jilted spouse on the altar. Where'd they go? And they go to Alabama, and he starts, and all of a sudden Nick Saban resigns, and Caden Proctor scuttlebutt starts. Is he going to come back? I heard he's homesick, and it all starts. You sit there and you say, I'm a 56-year-old man, and I'm reading the internet all day trying to figure out what a 19-year-old kid is going to do. So if that makes me a savage, I guess I'm a savage. I'm not going to battle -40-degree temperatures to watch an athletic event unless skin in the game. But if that's what a savage is, I guess that I'm it.
I was at Kinnick Stadium, -5 or 10 degrees. Iowa played Michigan, and it was the coldest game on record, I believe. I'm a savage, I guess. Gage?
I was at that game too.
Was you really?
I was also at the season opener, which was the hottest game ever that same year.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Iowa has good following. I mean, I've been to the Big Tens. I've been to the Rose Bowl. I go on a away trip, like I said, every year. And Iowa always has people. I mean, when we went to Terre Haute, Indiana to watch, the regional baseball last year, there's just as many Iowa fans, and not just as many, but it was probably, 40, 60, 30, 70, going to a town of not that many people where there's nothing to do. You're there to watch baseball. You're not really there on a vacation. So, Iowa fans show up.
All right, well, that's going to wrap up this edition of the WrestleCast. I want to thank you guys for being here this week. I also want to thank Helmerson Chiropractic out of New London. You know Kyle Helmerson. Did he wrestle for New London at one time?
No, but
Okay.
Kyle Helmerson was one of my former students, and I about need chiropractic help from him because I was an assistant basketball coach, and he's a big dude. He's like 6'3",
yeah.
and it was a
it was a layup drill, and I had a pad, and he just barreled into me, and I'm like, okay, my career's over. I thought I could hoop at one point, but this is just over. But he's a good guy, and I'm glad he's on board with the WrestleCast.
I was just looking at this predictions for the week, so I wanted to throw out there, something we'll be talking about next week, I'm sure. So first off, the dual pairings will be released this week. So top 24 at all 3 classes. There will be a 1 seed which will host, and then the 2 challengers. 2 and 3 seeds will wrestle first, and then there will be a final. Those 8 teams will go to the state duels. So that'll be released this week. They won't wrestle those this week. And then Friday is the girls' super regionals, which is a little different. Yeah. They're wrestled at 10 a.m. So there's 8 regionals, but they're at 4 different sites. So Sioux City, Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, and Mason City, all at like big kind of venues. And so there's 2 regionals at each one of the sites. It's 32 girl brackets. There's only 1 class in girls wrestling. So there's about 25, 26 teams in each spot. So the top 6 or so will get a first round bye. They wrestle it all the way to true 4th, and the top 4 girls at each weight qualify for state, and you'll have a 32 girl state tournament. So I'm planning to go. Josie Nelson probably has the best shot from Winfield, CJ. So, that'll be exciting, as that sport has kind of grown, and that'll be something we'll have to talk about next Sunday, I'm sure.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this week's program. We ask that you like and subscribe to our channel. And if you're interested in advertising, you can email us at thewrestlecast@outlook.com. That's THE WrestleCast@outlook.com. And once again, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel and check out some of the other videos. For Shane Barron and Gage Gill, I'm Danny Davis, and we'll talk to you next week.
That's it for this week's edition of the WrestleCast. For questions on advertising on our program, or if you'd just like to drop us a line, you can do so at sportscastmedia@outlook.com. Follow Sportscast Media on Facebook, or go to our website at www.sportscastmedia.com. The WrestleCast is a presentation of the Sportscast Media Network.